So, for the last nearly 2.5 days, we have been having several rounds of deliberations on several key topics. But one of the things that, right from the beginning of planning, which is almost a year ago, that we wanted to do was to have something concrete at the end of the whole Roots of Resilience conference so that something can be advocated towards the policy. So now I invite the member secretary of KDISC, Dr. PV Unnikrishnan, to kindly set the context of the Trivandrum Declaration and to deliver it.
I am extremely happy that Dr. Thomas Isaac is also here for this closing ceremony of this important conference. The whole concept of digital futures of Kerala, I would feel that was established by Dr. Isaac in his budget speech 2021 when he drew out the pathway for transition of Kerala to the knowledge society. As he had explained, the rationale was very clear. It was a contextual demand of transition of Kerala from a low productivity economic regime to a high productive economic regime. I don't know whether he had Basque and Mondragon in his mind, because that is also a space which is distinct in Europe as a social security model. And I don't know whether when he had been writing about the alternative Kerala, whether in his dream was he connecting with Basque, which was around a workers' cooperative, a Mondragon workers' cooperative, of which he raised a few critics, which the Uralangal Labor Cooperative has now been able to address by looking at the aspects of migrant workers. Now, Dr. Isaac, when he talked about the transition to Kerala's knowledge society, he had brought in 4 points. Number one, the first and most important point which he made here, that is the issue of participation of women in Kerala's economy, engendering the women and also ensuring the participation of the marginalized, that the knowledge society will continue to be equitable and sustainable the way that Kerala has been built up. Number two, he said that there would be a transition of the higher education system. The transition of the higher education system to create centers of excellence which would facilitate knowledge co-creation for local economic development and also for the growth of humanity. That is the second component. Third, he said there would be innovation. Of course, he did not focus on innovation for public goods as we are talking about, but of course, in the back of his mind, when he had been talking about innovation definitely not in the interest of the corporates and not in the interest of monopoly capital. He said that the state, he is trying to build an alternative to a neoliberal state. So naturally, whatever innovation he had been talking about cannot be which the neoliberal state is dictating. And the fourth one, the last one, he said that will be a digital transformation, which is the transformation of all the sectors where equity and sustainability will thrive and everybody will be proud to be part of the society and where everybody will have a space to go ahead. So where knowledge freedom is critical. He is also heading an organization called Democratic Alliance for Knowledge Freedom, which had been working on common goods, digital common goods. So I would take off from there. I'm extremely happy that whatever the declaration which we are making is a continuation of the great legacy which we carry forward from the budget speech of Dr. Thomas Isaac. And I'm extremely happy that, Trebor had also come here just before that, and Anita had been also interacting with us on looking at how to. We had been, over the last 1.5 and 2 years, we had been discussing on these things. And it's extremely, I'm thankful to Anita for actually facilitating this. There was some sort of objections in terms of, Trebor had mooted a proposal for, going ahead from the consultations at the Loga Kerala Sabha on a possible association between platform cooperative consortium and KDISC on taking forward the digital agenda. That of course could not get a clearance from the government earlier. In fact, now just before the conference we have got the clearance, and so we are extremely happy that we could take this forward as a part of this consultation here, and we would be in a position to work closer to the overall concept of this conference. 2 years earlier, we had made a declaration as a part of our knowledge mission strategy paper that we would be creating a platform for gig workers which would be different from the Uber and Zomato type of platforms, which will be worker owned. And where, as Dr. Isaac was indicating, the state would make an intervention and social rights of the workers will be protected. And the whole issue of the employee-employer relation not being appropriately defined would be also legally addressed. And the vulnerabilities of the gig economy as it remains would be completely addressed in a worker-owned mechanism of platform. That is what we had advocated. It had come up in the strategy paper. Dr. Arun was also part of that strategy discussions. We are now in the process of taking forward that. And I look forward to support from PCC as well as from the IT for Change for these activities also. I would now read out the declaration which has come out of quite a lot of consultations. The Trivandrum Declaration on a new innovation ecosystem for our collective digital futures. We, the global community, gathered here at the Kerala Arts and Crafts Village, Thiruvananthapuram, on 2nd December 2023 for the Roots of Resilience Conference. Envision a techno-social order based on the principles of fraternity and cooperation. The extractivist impulse of digital capitalism must be superseded by platform models grounded in cooperativist production principles. A radical course correction is required. Our collective digital futures hinge on shared ownership of technology resources so that innovation ecosystems can foster inclusive, equitable, just, and creative societies. We commit to a 5-point agenda that will lead us to the goal. 1. A new paradigm for innovation public goods. Digital public goods that are publicly financed and democratically governed are vital to galvanize people's stewardship of digital commons, achieve fair distribution of value, and stimulate an entrepreneurial culture. Policies must promote public provisioning of connectivity, cloud services, common data sources, digital intelligence, licensing standards, and other digital infrastructure. The collective right of communities to the knowledge generated from their data and a say in the governance of their data must be protected at all times. 2. A whole of society approach for empowering futures of work. The gig economy that dehumanizes workers and alienates society must make way for a feminist social contract that can promote justice, equality, and dignity in platform work. A society of algorithmic exploitation is untenable. Algorithmic intelligence must be subject to people's oversight and norms of social responsibility. Worker-owned platforms must be nurtured to unlock the promise of next-generation economy that redistributes the wealth of networks and the value of data. Digital age overhaul of cooperatives and social enterprises. Competitiveness and sustainability of platforms, of cooperatives in the platform economy depend on new institutional mechanisms backed by appropriate legal reform. Women and youth-led enterprises that are organized on solidarity economy principles need special policy focus. Tax incentives, preferential procurement, and public solidarity lending are crucial policy instruments for effective participation of producer cooperatives in the digital economy. 4. Civic intelligence and socio-political citizenship. The digital transition must be shepherded through a political vision to enhance democratic ideals, critical reasoning, and a digital rights awareness for citizen users. State policies for education and training must prioritize cooperative principles, social enterprise models, and mentorship programs. A sustainable digital transition. Sustainable societies are predicated on the responsible use of technologies. Policy choices for digitalization must therefore go lockstep with attention to their environmental impact. The AI economy must favor a regenerative local knowledge paradigm that advances sustainable livelihoods and harmonious coexistence between the human and non-human worlds. Issued by KDIS, IT for Change, and Platform Cooperative Consortium.
Thank you, Unnimash. Now I request Trebor Scholz and Anita Gurumurthy to hand over a copy of the Trivandrum Declaration to Honorable MLA Sri I.B. Satheesh in presence of Unnimash. Over the course of discussions in the last 2 days, we had mention of Pullambara Panchayat in Trivandrum district. Today morning, Thomas Isaac sir mentioned Kunnathakal Panchayat. Now, the Trinity College of Engineering, from whom we have the volunteers here, we belong to the Kattakkada constituency, which is represented by Honorable MLA Sri I.B. Satheesh. I would like to mention a couple of projects that have set Kattakkada apart. The first one, in which our college was lucky enough to contribute, was called Jala Samriddhi. And then the United Nations recognized it as an epitome of water conservation, preservation, and recharging. So if you look at the entire planet, it's probably only in Kattakkada that you will see that the water table is rising, actually. And that has been brought about under the leadership of Sri I.B. Satheesh. And now he's on a much more ambitious pursuit. It's called Carbon Neutral Kattakkada. We would like to get there quite fast. അപ്പോൾ ഏറെ സ്നേഹത്തോടെയും ബഹുമാനത്തോടെയും ശ്രീ I.B. സതീഷ് MLA ഈ സദസ്സിനെ അഭിസംബോധന ചെയ്യാനായി ക്ഷണിക്കുന്നു. വെൽക്കം സർ.
ആദരണീയരെ, പ്രിയമുള്ളവരെ, അതിജീവനത്തിൻ്റെ വേരുകൾ എന്ന ലക്ഷ്യത്തോടെ 15 രാഷ്ട്രങ്ങളിൽ നിന്നായി ഇവിടെ എത്തിച്ചേർന്ന എല്ലാ പ്രതിനിധികളെയും കേരളത്തിൻ്റെ തലസ്ഥാന നഗരത്തിന് വേണ്ടി, കേരളത്തിന് വേണ്ടി ഹൃദ്യമായി അഭിവാദ്യം ചെയ്യുകയാണ്. 2 കാരണങ്ങളാൽ ഈ വേദിയിൽ നിൽക്കുമ്പോൾ മനസ്സ് അഭിമാനം കൊള്ളുകയാണ്. ഒന്ന്, നവകേരളം എന്നത്, പുതിയ കാലത്തെ കേരളം എന്നത് ചർച്ച ചെയ്യപ്പെടുന്ന ഒരു സാഹചര്യത്തിലാണ് സഹകരണ മേഖലയിലെ കാലികവൽക്കരണം ഇവിടെ ചർച്ച ചെയ്യപ്പെട്ടത്. 2, ഈ ചർച്ചയ്ക്ക് വേദിയായി തിരഞ്ഞെടുക്കപ്പെട്ട ഒരിടം, അതിന് വലിയ പ്രാധാന്യമുണ്ട്. കേരളത്തിൻ്റെ സാമൂഹ്യ വളർച്ചയ്ക്ക് ഏറ്റവും നിർണായകമായ സംഭാവന നൽകിയ നവോത്ഥാന നായകന്മാരിൽ ഒരാളാണ് വാഗ്ഭടാനന്ദ സ്വാമികൾ. അദ്ദേഹം കൂലിവേലക്കാരുടെ സംഘം എന്ന നിലയ്ക്ക് മണ്ണിൽ പണിയെടുക്കുന്ന തൊഴിലാളികൾ ആഴ്ചയിലൊരിക്കൽ മിച്ചം പിടിക്കുന്ന പണം മൂലധനമാക്കി തുടങ്ങിയതാണ് ഊരാളുങ്കൽ സർവീസ് കോപ്പറേറ്റീവ് സൊസൈറ്റി. ഇന്ന് വൈവിധ്യവൽക്കരണത്തിലൂടെ ലോകത്തിൻ്റെ വിവിധ മേഖലകളിൽ വിവിധ തരം ദൗത്യങ്ങൾ ഏറ്റെടുക്കുന്ന ഒരു മഹാപ്രസ്ഥാനമായി ഊരാളുങ്കൽ കോപ്പറേറ്റീവ് സൊസൈറ്റി മാറിയിട്ടുണ്ട്. ആ സൊസൈറ്റിയുടെ ഒരു പ്രധാന പ്രവർത്തന മേഖലയായ ഹോസ്പിറ്റാലിറ്റി, അതിൻ്റെ ഒരു സ്വയം സംസാരിക്കുന്ന മാതൃകയാണ് വെള്ളാർ ക്രാഫ്റ്റ് വില്ലേജ്. തീർച്ചയായും തിരുവനന്തപുരം ഡിക്ലറേഷൻ വന്നു കഴിഞ്ഞിരിക്കുന്നു. അതിലൂടെ പെട്ടെന്ന് കടന്നു പോയപ്പോൾ മനസ്സിലായ ഒരു കാര്യം, മനസ്സിൽ തോന്നിയ ഒരു കാര്യം, മനുഷ്യന് വേണ്ടിയാണ് ടെക്നോളജി. ടെക്നോളജിക്ക് വേണ്ടിയല്ല മനുഷ്യർ എന്ന ഒരു ആന്തരികമായ അർത്ഥം ഈ തിരുവനന്തപുരം ഡിക്ലറേഷനുണ്ട് എന്ന് ഞാൻ വിചാരിക്കുന്നു. സഹകരണ മേഖലയെ സംബന്ധിച്ച അടിസ്ഥാനപരമായ കാഴ്ചപ്പാട് ഒരു പ്രദേശത്തിൻ്റെ വിഭവങ്ങൾ ആ പ്രദേശത്തു തന്നെ ഉപയോഗിക്കപ്പെടുക, വിനിയോഗിക്കപ്പെടുക. ഒരു പ്രദേശത്തിൻ്റെ വിഭവങ്ങളെ ചോർത്തിയെടുക്കുക എന്നതാണ് ലാഭക്കണ്ണോടെ പ്രവർത്തിക്കുന്ന കോർപ്പറേറ്റുകളുടെ ആകെ ലക്ഷ്യം. ഇന്ന് കേരളത്തിലെ സഹകരണ മേഖല ആ അടിസ്ഥാനപരമായ കാഴ്ചപ്പാടിനോട് ഒരു വെല്ലുവിളി നേരിടുകയാണ്. മൾട്ടി കോപ്പറേറ്റീവ് സൊസൈറ്റികൾ എന്ന പേരിൽ ആവിഷ്കരിക്കപ്പെടുന്ന ആശയം പ്രാദേശിക വിഭവങ്ങൾ ചോർത്തപ്പെടുന്നതിന് ഇടയാക്കുമോ എന്ന ആശങ്ക, അത് വെറും ആശങ്കയല്ല എന്ന് തെളിവാക്കപ്പെടുന്ന വിവരങ്ങൾ ലഭ്യമാകുന്നു. ഇവിടെ നമുക്ക് പ്രാദേശിക വിഭവങ്ങൾ, അത് സ്കില്ലാകട്ടെ, അത് പ്രാദേശിക കാർഷിക വിഭവങ്ങളാകട്ടെ, എല്ലാ തരത്തിലുമുള്ള മനുഷ്യൻ്റെ സൃഷ്ടികൾ ആ പ്രദേശത്തിൻ്റെ സമഗ്രമായ സാമ്പത്തികവും വിഭവസമൃദ്ധവുമായ ഭാവിക്ക് വേണ്ടി ഉപയോഗിക്കാൻ കഴിയും എന്നുള്ളതിൻ്റെ ചില മാതൃകകൾ നമ്മുടെ മുന്നിലുണ്ട്. ഞാൻ കരുതുന്നത്, എനിക്ക് മുമ്പ് സംസാരിച്ച ആദരണീയനായ മുൻ ധനകാര്യ വകുപ്പ് മന്ത്രി കുന്നത്തുകാൽ മാതൃകയെക്കുറിച്ച് പറഞ്ഞു. അങ്ങനെ നിരവധി മാതൃകകൾ നമ്മുടെ മുന്നിലുണ്ട്. ഒരു പ്രദേശത്തിൻ്റെ വിഭവശേഷി, മാനവ വിഭവശേഷി, ലേബർ ഫോഴ്സ് നമുക്കൊരു ഡിജിറ്റൽ പ്ലാറ്റ്ഫോമിൽ കൊണ്ടുവരാൻ കഴിയില്ലേ? ഒരു പ്രദേശത്ത് ലഭ്യമാകുന്ന കാർപ്പൻ്റർമാർ, ഇലക്ട്രീഷ്യന്മാർ, ഡ്രൈവർമാർ, മാനവശേഷിയുടെ പൊട്ടൻഷ്യൽ, സാധ്യത എന്ത് എന്ന് ഒരു മനുഷ്യന് ഡിജിറ്റൽ പ്ലാറ്റ്ഫോമിലൂടെ തിരിച്ചറിയാനാവുക. അതോടൊപ്പം വളരെ നിർണായകമായ ഒരു മേഖലയാണ് കാർഷിക മേഖല. കാർഷിക മേഖലയിൽ നിർണായകമായ പല സംഭാവനകളും ഡിജിറ്റൽ പ്ലാറ്റ്ഫോം വഴി ലഭ്യമാക്കാൻ കഴിയും. കാട്ടാക്കട മണ്ഡലത്തിൽ, ഇപ്പോൾ ഞങ്ങളുടെ മണ്ഡലത്തിൽ IoT എനേബിൾഡ് കോൺസ്റ്റിറ്റ്യുവൻസി ആക്കാനുള്ള ഒരു വലിയ ശ്രമം ഞങ്ങൾ നടക്കുകയാണ്. അതിൻ്റെ ആദ്യപടി എന്ന നിലയ്ക്ക് കാട്ടാക്കട പഞ്ചായത്തിൽ ചില പ്രവർത്തനങ്ങൾ നടക്കുന്നുണ്ട്. കാർഷിക മേഖലയിൽ മണ്ണിൻ്റെ സ്വഭാവം അറിഞ്ഞ് കാർഷിക രീതികൾ നിർണ്ണയിക്കാൻ പറ്റുന്ന ടെക്നോളജി നമുക്ക് വികസിപ്പിക്കാൻ കഴിഞ്ഞിട്ടുണ്ട്. അതുകൂടി ഉപയോഗിക്കാൻ നമുക്ക് കഴിഞ്ഞാൽ കാർഷിക മേഖലയിൽ ഇന്ന് നമ്മൾ ചർച്ച ചെയ്യപ്പെടുന്ന പല പ്രതിബന്ധങ്ങളെയും മറികടക്കാനാവും. അങ്ങനെ പല അർത്ഥത്തിലും വളരെ നിർണായകമായ സംഭാവനകൾ നൽകാൻ പറ്റുന്ന ഒരു ബ്രെയിൻ സ്റ്റോമിംഗ് എക്സസൈസാണ് ഇവിടെ നടന്നത് എന്ന് ആണ് ഞാൻ വിചാരിക്കുന്നത്. കഴിഞ്ഞ 2 ദിവസങ്ങളെ നഷ്ടപ്പെടുത്തിയത് ഒരു വലിയ നഷ്ടമായിട്ടാണ് ഇവിടെ വന്നപ്പോൾ തോന്നിയത്. എന്തായാലും മഹത്തായ ഡിക്ലറേഷൻ, പ്രഖ്യാപനം ആയി. ഒരുപക്ഷെ കേരളത്തിൻ്റെ ഭാവിയിലേക്കുള്ള ഒരു മാറ്റത്തിൻ്റെ, പരിവർത്തനത്തിൻ്റെ മാഗ്ന കാർട്ടയായി ഈ തിരുവനന്തപുരം ഡിക്ലറേഷൻ മാറട്ടെ എന്ന് ആഗ്രഹിച്ച്, അങ്ങനെ സംഭവിക്കുമെന്ന പ്രതീക്ഷയോടെ ഒരിക്കൽ കൂടി ആശംസകൾ നേർന്ന് ഞാൻ എൻ്റെ വാക്കുകൾ നിർത്തുന്നു. നന്ദി, അഭിവാദ്യം.
I'll just summarize and briefly translate the speech of Honorable MLA. He welcomed everyone from 15 different countries who have gathered here to the city of Trivandrum, and then said that there are 2 important things. One is a temporal context in which we are doing this, because right now the entire state is engaged in an exercise called Nava Keralam, which means building the new Kerala. The entire cabinet is traveling throughout the state in every constituency, meeting and receiving ideas about how to take the state forward. So in that context, this becomes a supremely important meeting that we had in Trivandrum. The second one he mentioned is about the venue where we are sitting and where we have conducted this. So one of the greatest social reformers of the state, Vagpadananda, had led to a formation of cooperatives, which was literally called Kooligalda Sahaya Sangham, which was people who were in daily wage. They had come together to form the cooperative, and their weekly savings were added on to it, from which it went on to become what is today the Uralungal Labour Cooperative Service Society, which is now diversified into various territories, including hospitality, and this very venue is part of that cooperative. So there is temporally and spatially a context in which we have set it. Then he mentioned that the Trivandrum Declaration, in summary, means technology is for human beings and not the other way around, that human beings are for technology. So that's the gist of Trivandrum Declaration that the MLA summarized. Then he talked about local economic development, which needs to be the crux of any platform cooperative that comes up. Local resources, including skilled workers or agricultural produce and so on, must be made sure is beneficial for the local economic development itself. So he expressed his fear about multi-state cooperatives which are coming up, which could lead to, again, local economic exploitation without paying back to that very set of people who are producers. So he gave a very specific example of how skilled workers and agricultural produce in a particular area can be brought onto the platform, helping them be more efficient in the distribution. Talking about a specific example from Kattakkada, the constituency is right now in an IoT-enabled mode, Internet of Things-enabled mode, where the soil quality for the farmers is being measured using IoT devices, and the data is being made available to the farmers so that production can be improved. So he mentioned that having listened to the sessions here towards the end, he felt that he had missed out on a great opportunity in the last 2 days and should have been here earlier. Then he wished that the Trivandrum Declaration goes on to become the Magna Carta for cooperatives and economic change for the state. So thank you very much. Now I invite Dr. Trebor Scholz to make some remarks.
Well, thank you, everybody. I will just keep this very short after these amazing speeches. I think walking away from this conference, one thing that was really reaffirmed for me and was like a really beautiful insight was to see all these different kinds of knowledges contributing equally to the conversation. So you had people running cooperatives, you had really high-flung academics, and to me, sitting in a seat listening to you, those were equal contributions. And I think that was important and wonderful. And second, what I took away is the importance of working with people, right? So we talked a lot about the state, we talked a lot about what government can do, and we also talked about that we can never forget that this really has to be driven by the people first, right? By their needs first, and that government can then support them. And so walking away from this meeting, I just take also many new friendships and encounters with me, and hope that among this really important new Magna Carta for the cooperative movement all over the globe, we will also have small concrete steps that we can revisit maybe a year from now and have tangibly implemented some of these very important aspirations. So I thank you all, and a big hug to all of you.
Now I invite Anita for some remarks.
It's a pity it's getting over, but I think all magic has to make way for more magic. So we pause at this point, but I just wanted to share a little bit about what we took away as an organization in terms of the substantive discussions. So just before I begin, and it won't take too long, I just wanted to pose this question to you because it only has one answer, so I hope you all get it right. What is the cure for bad democracy? More democracy? Yes. So what's the cure for poor quality public goods? Better quality public goods. What's the cure for failed commons? More commons. So in some sense, I think we are part of that journey to make things a reality. And so I think the failure is just a step to learn and to go forward. So I just wanted to share a bit of what we heard from different rooms and different groups. So maybe, Ranjita, you can start my presentation. Extremely thankful to all of you who labored and labored behind the scenes. And thank you for those moving community lab reports. And there's more work to be done, indeed. But even as I was sitting here, the labs were discussing definitions and trying to sort out, issues. And I think that's a great sign that we have enough contestation within the group to produce, I think, what we might really want to get towards. So I just want to give a synthesis of what happened. We started with the question of what's wrong with the mainstream platform economy. We said that technological innovation is moving in a direction where workers are facing indignity, injustice, and exploitation. There's an intensification of caste, class, gender hierarchies in labor markets. We also said that workers in this paradigm are decapacitated and invisible care work is underwriting capital. Extractivist paradigm that this is coming with huge environmental costs. And unfortunately, and this is something that I heard many speakers refer to, that public policy imagination is limited by the discourse that is sold by big tech about the unicorn model, and this is sold as the only feasible option for digital development. The public institution of the marketplace is being privatized. The open internet of horizontal peer-to-peer connection has been displaced by enclosures, where the value of decentralized networks is centralized in the dominant platform model. Platforms have also replaced public infrastructural and social policy functions. Just as someone said, we are not only witnessing the Amazonification of the market, but Baijufication of education. There's a public trust deficit in cooperatives, but it's important to reclaim their promise for an alternative digitalization. Next slide. What is the vision we said there is for a new digital future? An economy of belonging that Mary Watson referred to in the first opening, that gives equal priority to production and social reproduction and a society of care and mutualism. A digital economy based on cooperativist values and principles and meaningful solidarities, and taking cooperativism to the digital age is not just a fringe alternative, but a mainstream choice for multi-scalar markets, from local to maybe national or beyond. A worker-owned platform firm model based on traditional co-op principles is to be recovered in the discourse and practice, including through shared ownership, member-based stakeholdership and not share capital, equity options rather than venture capital, and a readiness for a new production paradigm transition to leverage data-based intelligence responsibly and contextually. Next. Digital innovation ecosystems must support public and social value creation so that innovation can work for marginal small, medium enterprises, local self-government institutions, and other people's institutions. Use cultures must generate and reinforce a productive and accountable dynamic between public and commons-based digital regimes. A normative shift is needed towards tech licensing models grounded in a copyleft or commons logic to prevent the cannibalization of digital commons by capital. Cross-movement solidarities are needed for an alternative to platform capitalism. Next slide. So, with so many policymakers gathered here and so many of us who have access to policymakers, we all said over the 3 days, and this is an imperfect but somewhat, I think, collectively arrived at analysis of where we should go with respect to public policy. I would certainly concur that many of us here may want to nuance this and change this, but this is a partial kind of reflection of the discussions that we've had. So the first strategy is about engendering vibrant co-op tech ecosystems for a new digital future. The second strategy is to create an enabling environment for cooperatives to embrace digital opportunities. And the third strategy is to regulate for a fair and just digital economy. Next slide. So how do we engender vibrant cooperative tech ecosystems? How does policy do this? So we said a public community ecosystem for innovation is needed that is more than just a toolbox. We often talk about public-private partnerships, but forget that there could be public-community partnerships. So one is public data exchanges or common data spaces where the ground norm, as someone said, borrowing from the disability movement, is there's nothing about us without us. So no data about us without us. Data exchange is created and stewarded by local government units with participation of citizens. Government to government, government to citizen, business to government, citizen to citizen, data sharing mechanisms based on rule of law for access and use. For example, in key sector public institution, key sectoral data sets can be mandated by public institutions for pooling and creation of high priority data sets. The second is public platform backbones. Techno-design choices that prioritize interoperable open and commons protocols are necessary so that we can make right-to-data accessibility a reality. Policies to determine what part of the infrastructure will be public and how spaces for digital commoning and innovation will be carved out is very important. And we take away from the example cited of the Akshaya centers, where one layer is provisioned as a public good layer, and on top of that, there is enterprise. Affirmative policies for platform commons initiatives that can interconnect with these public backbones, statewide or local initiatives, for instance, taking pilots like the Kerala Food Platform to scale or enabling hyperlocal platform initiatives. The second strategy is enabling an environment for cooperative cooperatives digitalization. The first is cooperative governance regimes need updation. We've said this time and again in many sessions. Second is that policies and programs must advance digital societies that engender civic intelligence and community trust so that we don't look at community institutions or cooperatives in isolation, but take a whole of society approach. And the third is institutional mechanisms, perhaps a specialized government agency required for networked support to encourage and handhold the platformization of cooperatives. We need a special vehicle that can accomplish this. And the third and final strategy is regulation for just digital futures. And my colleagues from the community lab have also spoken about this. Platform work arrangements need regulation to protect foundational labor guarantees and workers' rights in algorithmic managerial controlled environments. This extends from freedom of association, wages, working conditions, social security, occupational safety, prevention of sexual harassment, algorithmic accountability to worker data rights. Collective bargaining modalities and recognition of platform work unions by digital transnational corporations. And this is a state where a tripartite dialogue was made possible with a ride-hailing company because of the labor commissioner. A new state-level legislation in Kerala similar to initiatives in Rajasthan and Karnataka. We need to rein in the dominant transnational digital corporations and make the right to the internet meaningful and substantive through complementary regulation. At the national level, we have debates about dark patterns, how they interfere with consumer rights, and we need to actually address such things that lock in consumers into predatory markets. Competition regulation to prevent cannibalization and capture by big tech of nonprofit and commons initiatives, and differential compliance thresholds so that we don't kill small and cooperative-based institutions, solidarity economy institutions. So differential compliance thresholds to correct the paradox where corporations get away lightly, but collective enterprises falter because of all the burdens that are placed on them. Next. And data governance for redistributive justice, moving beyond the privacy and consent framework that feminists have critiqued, to a framework that effectively protects vulnerable communities in the data economy. Policy frameworks that promote the flourishing of open data collaboratives, but by making public data available for citizens to engage in social audits, people's science, and prevent the capture of open data value by corporations. And lastly, enabling agility of policy making itself by building institutional capacity. Thank you very much. This is a partial representation of what we have heard, but I hope it reasonably captures, what we've all spoken about. And I really want to thank all of you for making this happen, and I hand it back to Dr. Arun.
Good afternoon, everybody. I feel like a lot of what I was going to say was already said, but I just wanted to, I have some notes that are worth repeating, some phrases and things that I heard. So first I want to say our challenge, not to just do no harm, but to actually be transformative. I think we've heard a lot about that already. To use the human rights framework, right? Putting people before technology, monitoring the humanity of technology, pushing back on the extractive nature of digital platforms and gig economies. We need platform cooperativism to be part of and connected to movement building and systemic change, part of solidarity economies, right? How do we do that? How do we make sure the platform co-ops do their caring work, make caring work better, and provide different models of care, that ethics of care we've heard about, how to add mutual care to co-op values, right? The hardest work is that emotional work, the compassion, the solidarity, safety, agency, and advocacy. So how do we make sure that's infused in what we do? How do we create safe spaces for people? Recognize and address vulnerabilities, race, gender, ableism, etc. How do we embrace the informal as well as the formal co-op structures and make sure we're not leaving the informal out? How do we focus again on that economic agency at all levels? And then labor sovereignty. We heard a lot about how to value and empower labor in new ways, how to bring workers' voices in at every level, to recognize and incorporate informal workers, the need for universalism, right? Universal coverage for all workers to understand work, right, in that broader sense of what we do, how we reproduce ourselves, and to decentralize that universalization, to make sure the returns go back to the workers, right, that workers get the benefits. And then I also heard the key element is control. Who has the control? And again, what's the ownership culture? Again, we need workers to see themselves as being in control and to have that control. And that control needs to be democratic. We need to ensure democracy, democratic participation. That includes, right, a role for women. We've heard a lot about that, unpacking patriarchy, recognizing and enabling women's contributions and transferring economic power to women, recognizing the intersectionalities, right, women, race, ableism, et cetera, all those pieces. We also heard about engaging youth, and that engaging youth helps to contribute to our sustainability as well as our accessibility. That enterprises need to focus on environmental sustainability. We heard about that too. Place still matters. Community building is still needed. We need affordability and capitalization. Those are still challenges. And we need to address, obviously, the digital divide, digital literacy, create digital equity, control over data and knowledge, the commoning of knowledge, commoning of the digital world and data stewardship, and finally, combating the expropriation of knowledge. We need to decommodify knowledge. So in sum, the importance of being people-centered, democratically controlled from the grassroots, and focused on transformation. Thank you.
Thanks to the organizers and thanks to all the participants. It was an amazing experience. The bottom line of this experience for me is, yes, another world is possible. We've heard it this morning. And this was really something that was very much reaffirmed for me over the course of this conference. It overall felt like a trip into the future, a very progressive future in which cooperative builders, workers, researchers, and policymakers collectively work together in order to enable economic justice. We have seen powerful examples of commons infrastructures already in place, already working as a viable business, at least in local and regional levels, such as Kerala, that I found a really inspiring place and experience. What we need now and what the global political and environmental situation urges us to do next is to build a global alliance of cooperative organizations. It seems that we might have a small window of opportunity to train ourselves in social coordination at scale, across countries, across jurisdictions, across bureaucracies, and across policies. We have to learn how to develop a common vision that goes beyond our established trust networks. And I personally think that in many ways we have to learn how to grow outside of ourselves and how to stretch our imagination to an extent we might not be able to grasp yet. So my main takeaway of this conference is to create space in my very often overloaded work schedule to really make sure to reach out to you, to be in touch, and to see how we can help each other. Thank you.
Good afternoon. I want to close by actually returning to something that Professor Gordon Nemhard said on our first day, which is that cooperation is not new and cooperative principles predate modern cooperatives and coexist with them. So we've learned a lot over the last few days about how to create legal and financial and policy infrastructures that support cooperatives and allow them to flourish. And I think as we pursue those, it's worth keeping in view that the cooperative movement will succeed to the extent that we also cooperativize our whole lives, and to the extent we live and house ourselves cooperatively, consume cooperatively, and also keep alive the cooperative forms that have always exceeded the institutional ones that we're describing here. So in solidarity with my fellow speakers and all of you, I will leave it there. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you to the PCC, IT for Change, and all our supporters for organizing this amazing event. For me, this conference has been a source of great inspiration, especially the stories from our colleagues all over the world and from India. Their experiences highlight the transformative power of platform cooperativism. It offers a more equitable approach to economic activity, although it's not a complete solution to the problems of capitalism. As we think about change, I am reminded of Karl Marx's famous statement: the philosophers have only interpreted the world in various ways. The point, however, is to change it. This message resonates deeply with our gathering here. We are not just observers or thinkers, we are change makers, actively shaping a better future, our future. The song which the Olali brand sang the first day, forgive me if I'm wrong, the names of the song, How Much We Really Need, right? I may be wrong. Has echoed a powerful message, and I realized that our needs are actually very basic, yet often unmet by those few who control platforms. We don't need much, we just want rightfully ours. During 2 days and a half, each story, each discussion at this conference is a step forward to change. We are here not only to understand the world's problem, but to actively participate in solving them, driven by our belief in fairness and justice, which we can find it in the cooperative principles. And that at that moment, during the coffee break, Anurag hugged me. You know, thank you very much. And at that moment, I realized that, well, I believe together we can continue to learn, grow, and make a significant change we envision for our world. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Also, thank you very much to the IT for Change, PCC, and KDIS for putting together such a strong declaration. And end of your presentation was very powerful, Anita. Thank you so much for putting together in such a short time. And I really don't know then how to recap my thoughts after such a such strong presentation. But I would like to highlight 2-3 things here. One is obviously that we realize that maybe the policies or the present systems are failing us or humanity or the planet per se, because everything is connected to everything. And in such a scenario, a lot of onus is then on the people to think in newer ways, or think of newer ways of solutioning, or innovation then takes the forefront. And somehow within the social systems we are in, or the political challenges that we face, and also sometimes the inability to understand risks, so those risk-taking abilities that we should have as humans, which are not nurtured, I feel, our education, or even in our professional life, we are not taught to understand how to address risk. Then the tendency remains again to think of new systems, but in the given in the given box itself. So you are not encouraged too much to think tangentially, and consequently, and we have discussed this, like million times here now that, the technology takes the center stage. And somehow then we get occupied with, solving the challenges of the technology. So what are the problems with the technology as a solution than, focusing on the solution itself. So a lot of your investment also goes into making the technology robust and not on, making the social innovation robust. And that itself then creates, again, a chain of inequities. So, and there are two more things that I feel that one is obviously the big tech. We know that is, it's like a black hole. So it's absorbing a lot of public good or, community-led initiatives. But there are also, I mean, there are good startups, but there are also startups who have now started co-opting, say, smaller economies or local, hyper-local economies, wherein the lure is there of, having more economic gains, but at the end of the day, they also feel that, their ideas or innovations, or they become more disenfranchised in the entire process. And secondly, I feel that, the technology sometimes, and actually most of the times, doesn't acknowledge the value and contribution of indigenous knowledge and, community knowledge. That also becomes a problem, because then, again, community knowledge or your traditional knowledge gets sidelined. And whether it is technology, which we know is a part of the solution, and for that matter, I would also say that platform co-ops are also a solution towards a bigger goal that we should always keep in mind, which is of social justice or climate justice or gender justice or economic justice. So that bigger picture, one has to always keep in mind that this is what we are trying to solve through cooperatives or through platform cooperatives. And obviously, then bringing in the global experiences or local experiences becomes important, because that's a very strong learning and a hands-on way to go about it. Thank you so much.
I invite Ganesh Gopal. I had this thought just now when Manvi was speaking that she said cooperativism should be a means to something like climate justice. I thought if cooperativism was already in our blood, then we wouldn't have to fight for climate justice.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Ganesh Gopal from the International Cooperative Alliance Asia Pacific office, and I lead entrepreneurship development at the Delhi office. Though I'm here representing the ICAP regional office, I must say I'm more happy to say that today I'm here. I'm from Kerala and I'm from Trivandrum, and I must say it is a good day to be a Malayali. I think the discussions on the Trivandrum Declaration started off with the statement, place matters in conversation. And I think no better place than Kerala, with its historic roots in the resilience in people's movements and several of these values that we spoke about in the last few days. A lot of it in defense to a lot of issues that we face in society, whether it be tech, whether it be policy, whether it be lacunae in lack of inclusive societies. In an emerging platform-based economy in a highly interconnected world, the trap of techno-solutionism, like one of our colleagues earlier mentioned, should be driven by needs, not by pushing through tech, but something that they can afford and something they can understand. Beyond the much touted and lauded cooperative examples of Uralungal, Dinesh, and traditional successful cooperatives in Kerala, the paradigm of Kerala is much beyond just cooperatives. It is deeply embedded in the values of cooperativism, as shown in the bottoms-up movements, not just in the past few decades, but in the past 2 centuries in Kerala. I mean, we are also honored to have Isaac Sir, one of the architects of the People's Planning movement in Kerala. There couldn't have been a better venue than Kovalam Arts and Crafts Village, like an earlier speaker mentioned, led by ULCCS, which is a glowing example of cooperative governance as well as cooperative diversification in the 21st century. Douglas North, the American economist, I keep repeating this, would have been proud with the institutional quality that these cooperatives have immortalized in front of us, with examples that we are sitting right next to us, ranging from construction to IT services. There are so many good examples right in Kerala that we can look up to. But when I say this, I'm also pained by the dichotomy of the cooperative movement in our country, which is also read by a lot of ills and evils, mostly the traditional brick and mortar cooperatives. There is so much more that we can do, so much reform that we can bring in, so much credibility we can build and rebuild within the movement. Today, we have unveiled the Trivandrum Declaration, a momentous decree, or so as to say, with a collective voice of delegates from across the world, across 15 countries. And with Kerala, Trivandrum being my home city, bearing witness and hosting such an instance, and no other better person than Unnimash to declare or to recite these words of forward-looking vision for the cooperative movement. As Trebor mentioned, we would be moving and looking towards this as a new Magna Carta for the cooperative movement or the platform cooperative movement worldwide. I would just like to end by quoting a very cute, small Malayalam quote I came across recently. ഒഴുകുന്ന ജലവും പാറയും പലപ്പോഴും ഏറ്റുമുട്ടും ജയിക്കുന്നത് എപ്പോഴും ജലമായിരിക്കും അതിൻ്റെ ശക്തി കൊണ്ടല്ല നിർത്താതെയുള്ള പരിശ്രമം കൊണ്ട്. The theme of our conference today is the roots of resilience. Just to translate what it means, when a continuously flowing brook meets a hard boulder, it doesn't stop. Eventually, the water always wins because of the sole virtue of resilience. I'm sure Alfred Lord Tennyson, when he wrote, "For men may come and men may go, I go on forever," he wasn't referring to cooperatives. But today, we look upon the values of resilience and look upon the Trivandrum Declaration and all the wonderful forward-looking things that we've discussed. And I think on a positive note, we can end and look forward to a better collective future and better alternatives to a platform capitalist economy. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone. For us at IT for Change, the Roots of Resilience was not just a conference, but it was about building community, and that's what I feel like today. And the PCC community, as Trebor was also sharing on the first day, over many years, there is a dream of the global commonwealth of cooperatives that it carries, and this is but just another step in that dream that we all have to jointly walk towards. And I'm very proud and happy that all of us are gathered here today, and we are at yet another step to realize that dream. With reference to the messages of the conference, if there is one takeaway, this is what I learned over the past 2.5 days, that capitalism is not just an economic order. It's an entire institutional system, and the transformation is about changing things so that we are no longer subjects of capital, but agents of commonsification. So in this transformation from the wasteland of capitalism to a new verdant future, the road seems very long. Things seem even more complex, as Dr. Isaac said earlier today, and our heart sometimes grows despondent. So we should always remember the high on which we are ending this day today. We began this conference with a poem, and a poem from Kerala, which is in your booklets. I'm sure you have seen that. So I thought it fitting that we end this with a poem from the Harlem Renaissance, Langston Hughes, and his words, being walkers with the dawn and morning, walkers with the sun and morning. We are not afraid of the night, nor days of gloom and darkness. Let's walk towards the new dawn of Navakeralam. Thank you so much.